Woo, all right. Boy, I feel like I'm marathoning these days as far as podcasts go. I've got a bunch of shows that I've already been on this week, and a bunch that I'm going to be on this week. And I've already recorded a couple episodes personally to release, of course, to all the Sovereign Tech patrons. And again, Patreon-only content. And, of course, my thanks goes out to all of the patrons for helping make all this go round and round. But I thought I'd, make some bonus content for you here. And you'll have to pardon me if I end up, you suddenly hear me taking a pause and drinking because, and it's just tea, folks, relax. Because, my mouth is going a mile a minute, it seems, anyway, the past few days. So, been a crazy couple weeks, frankly. And the craziness is not going to stop. So, recording a lot of content for you to be able to consume and enjoy. And this one is one that I had teased would be coming out. And that is my review of recently, just actually last week. So I'm recording this April 11th, 2017. Just last week, I ended up going to, actually it was the week before and then into last week. I went to merry old England. Woo! Dun, 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 dun. All right. And it was, went there to visit friends, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I. We went there to visit Jake DeSillis and his wife, Hannah. Just that they're friends of ours. Jake, of course, does the voluntary life, which is tremendous work. Hannah does her own Becoming Who You Are, which is kind of a multimedia extravaganza of, self-improvement, self-help, whatever you want to call that industry. Some people take umbrage with some of those terms and not, I want to be respectful of that. But, of course, I love Jake's podcast, very important podcast. And he's one of, admittedly, we have some history to talk about. That's going to be kind of the main thing, is there's one particular thing we did while I was in England that I found to be very interesting to see. So, hold on to your hats for that one, because that'll be kind of the centerpiece of the show. But to describe, I love hanging out with these people. They are such good people. I love getting to hang out with Jake. Jake is that rare, in my opinion, he's one of the rare, he's one of the last thinkers that is not, libertarian / anarcho-capitalist thinkers, that has not compromised his principles. And also isn't an asshole. He's not pedantic on social media or anything. And constantly, trying to rile up some people and rustle some feathers or something, like some other commentators Facebooktarians that I can think of off the top of my head. And so Jake, I really consider Jake's work to be so important because, again, he is that guy who's never compromised his principles. Whether he and I agree on everything or not doesn't matter at all. The bottom line is that I respect him because, unlike other people, he's stuck to his guns. He's really no, guess what? Immigration, bad. Or not bad. I mean, hindering immigration is bad. That immigration, good thing. Let people through. I mean, he's written great articles for fee, I believe. Actually, he even wrote for fee on some of the, Foundation for Economic Education. About immigration and why you need to allow people, freedom of travel, why you shouldn't be building walls and all of this. Lots of just great work. Again, tremendous thinker, in my opinion, even though his show, The Voluntary Life, doesn't necessarily highlight that. It does here and there. He's done episodes about the Enlightenment, which were very popular and very well done. I'm a huge fan. I shared all of them when they were coming out, and he has more to do on that series. But yeah, he's doing, in my opinion, some very important work. Whether or not we agree with each other or see eye to eye, again, on every little subject, it doesn't matter because we both know we're working towards actual, real human freedom. And that's kind of the most important thing. So, hey, we get to be friends and hang out and have a good time and chat. And, it was a wonderful time. And most of the time, while we were there, a lot of it was, talking it up, walking around town and everything. We were in Brighton, and in fact, we actually went to, in Brighton, Jake held a meetup. He held a meetup for his podcast, for the Voluntary Life podcast. And quite a few people showed up. It was a nice little crowd. And people just kind of talking it up. In fact, I was amazed. One of the people that showed up, this guy was practically a statist. I mean, really, like Marxist, the whole thing. And he was kind of arguing with me. It's like, really, is privacy something that should be available across the board, all this different stuff? And I mean, it made for a hell of a conversation. It was kind of weird. I wouldn't expect that at a voluntary life, meetup, but it was so cool to do that. I'd love to do something like that with Sovereign Tech where people could just, show up in a certain part of the U.S. or wherever, and, we could all just get together and just start shooting the shit and talking things up and everything. I think that'd be fantastic. Well, whenever that can happen, we'll have to see. Stephanie and I have talked about doing that for Sex and Science Hour more particularly. But I think it'd be fun to do one for Sovereign Tech as well, or maybe a hybrid between the two. That'd be all right. So anyway, went there, visited them. That was great. They're in Brighton, which is a beautiful town, city, really. One of the major. I don't know if it's a major city in England, but it's a major city. It's good sized. Lots going on. I mean, England is. So this is like my first time, or this would be like my second or third time ever going to England, and I mean, it's funny for me because England. I live in New England in New Hampshire, right? That whole general area is called New England, and it's funny because you really get the name because when you go to England, it doesn't look that much different. Like a lot of the architecture is kind of the same. I mean, there's differences, of course, but at the same time, it still feels rather homely, like, I mean, it's not too bad. And the rest, it's just like everywhere else where there's different, you can go to an Indian restaurant, you can go to, I don't know, whatever. I mean, there's Chinese restaurants you can go to, you can go get sushi, you can do all this stuff. So, I mean, it's not like there's a huge difference in food available. The one thing as far as food-wise that I do love in England is there is a chain called Bankers, and it's all they do, pretty much all they do is fish and chips. Like, they do anything that's what could be remotely considered traditional British food. And I love that. I love Bankers. Like, it is so good. It's the one place whenever I end up in England, I want to make sure I stop there and eat there. And it's not like it's that special of a place. I mean, it's a chain, but it's good. But I mean, everything else is there. McDonald's is there. All this other stuff is there. So, you walk around quite a bit in England. I mean, obviously there's always the shock. I might have talked about this the last time that I went to England, but there is always the shock that when you're looking at when you're looking at buildings in England, and you ask, like, oh, how old's that building, In America, when you ask that, oh, yeah, oh, boy, that's like 100 years old, and that's very impressive. Or if you're, in certain areas, areas that would have been the 13 colonies, maybe you'd get something that's a couple hundred years old or something like that. Or you go to Florida, right? And you go to St. Augustine, which is the first city of America, and all of these things. And you go, wow, boy, that's really something, 200, 300 years old, But then when you go to England or Europe in general, it's just always so amazing because it's like, oh, yeah, that building's, 1,000 years old. It's like, whoa. And you can't, and you have, or at least for me, me being the historian at heart, like, I just have to touch it because you think about, like, all of the hands, all of the people, all the different lifestyles and ways of thinking that had to have touched that. Over that amount of time, not just a couple hundred years. Oh, man. I mean, it blows my mind. So on this trip to England, as compared to the last one we went to a couple of castles. I mean, we really went around. This one, we didn't do so much of the historical road trip, shall we say. But we did end up. And this is kind of the highlight of the whole trip. I mean, it was just fun hanging out with people, and going around and everything. In fact, in Brighton, there's this like almost looks like the Space Needle, right? Like was that Seattle with the Space Needle? It almost looks like the Space Needle, but what it is, it's actually made by British Airways. And it's literally manned by, like, pilots and all this stuff, even though it doesn't really, like, fly around. But it's this needle that goes up. I think it's the second tallest structure, maybe, in Britain, next to, like, I don't know, the Eye of London or whatever. And it's called the I-360. And it is this needle that goes up, the structure that goes up. And then there is this, like it looks like a UFO around it, like a donut, around this needle. And it's completely transparent, except for the floor. And I thought it would have been cool if the floor was transparent too. But anyway, it goes up all that distance, and you can look, over, onto the channel, because of course Brighton is a beach town. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. In fact, my profile pictures on various social media is actually a picture of me and Stephanie right now, from atop the I-360. That's why looks like we're looking down on Brighton. It's because we are. And that was kind of cool. I mean, it's only up there for a few minutes. It feels very futuristic. It's pretty cool, but it's like 15 pounds a person or something to go. I think that's what it costs to go up on it. And yeah, is what it is. It was cool. It was worth doing, at least once, and it's fun to kind of walk around on it. But I mean, you have to buy tickets. It's like a full-on ride, and I mean, they treat it as serious as as like if you were boarding an airplane. I mean, in many ways they really do. You still have to go through security. You got to do all this other stuff. It was interesting. So the I-360, if you happen to be in Brighton, I mean, it's worth checking out. So we did that, and then kind of the big thing we did, we spent one night. So we got a hotel, but we spent one night in this city, and we went to Bath, the city of Bath in Somerset in England. And Bath is a fascinating city, in my opinion. Now, my understanding of it, as it was described to me by the friends we were visiting, is that it's like a very middle class city. Like, it's not very posh, right? But regardless of that, of whatever its present economic status is, I know actually I met somebody there, just a fantastic young woman who's actually going to college there. It was great getting to meet her. She was doing great work there. So there's a fair university effectively there, and but it's a very historic town. In fact, I think it's technically a World Heritage Site. The entire city of Bath, and you can tell because this was a city that was built in 80-60 or 60 CE, right? Or, well, the Holocene calendar, what would that be? That'd be 10,060 HE. And it was built by the Romans. I mean, well, the argument goes is that there was a little something extra there already, but the city itself, largely was built by the Romans in the first century. And you feel it. Like when you walk around, not the entirety of Bath, but a good amount of Bath, especially in the center of town, you really feel like you're walking in Rome. You feel like you're absolutely walking in a Roman city. Now, that's where kind of the name of it comes from, is Bath, because there are the famous, which I kind of got to see, the famous Roman baths, bathhouses, which is where, as far as Rome goes, bathhouses were, in my opinion, or the bath itself, is the centerpiece of what allowed for any kind of cultural advancement, technological advancement, and whatever else. It was the centerpiece of life for anybody that got anything done in Rome. So that was really cool to be able to see those, especially, in fucking England. I mean, I've seen them before. I've been to Rome as well, but that was really something. So it was. I didn't expect it because I didn't know that much. There were some things I knew about Bath, but I didn't realize at just what scale how much of the city would feel like a Roman city. And I just, on a personal, level, I love that. Like, I absolutely loved it because, you felt like you were walking in that. Look, I'm not praising the Roman Empire. I'm not saying the Roman Empire is some kind of great cultural force or something like this. I'm just saying that, it was certainly an incredibly important civilization to have been on this earth, and to kind of experience it in a very visceral way is always a powerful thing for me. And so that was really something to get that feeling, because I wasn't expecting it. Not going to England anyway. I mean, I know the whole history. I know about, the history of Rome and England, but I mean, the Romans built London. But it was just like Bath really still had that flair to it. It really still had that aura to it of, yep, the Romans were here. And that was really something. Now, I could talk a little bit more about the hotel, but, I guess what I want to first talk about is there were two buildings that I knew that I wanted to see when we were going to Bath. And neither of these have anything to do with Roman architecture. So that's why what I knew of Bath, I wasn't expecting it to be so, again, Roman. The two buildings that I wanted to check out were, one is the Royal Crescent, and the other is what's known as the Circus. Now, both of these are examples of Georgian architecture. And the Circus itself, both of these buildings were, pretty much completed in the 18th century. And so there's some interesting, I'll explain what gets interesting about it. But you had John Wood, an architect named John Wood, who was probably a Freemason. Do with that information what you want. And you had John Wood the Elder, and then John Wood the Younger. John Wood the Elder is this very famous architect in England, in the 1700s, and very well respected, very well known, pretty wealthy too. And he lays out all these plans for the circus and for these other buildings in the city of Bath. He dies before he gets to complete any of them, and so his son, John Wood the Younger, ends up taking over and takes it on, and finishes up these buildings. And these buildings have very, very particular positioning, and also like a very particular, I'm not sure what the architectural term for this would be, but particular dimensions, shall we say. Now, as far as the particular where they are, the Royal Crescent doesn't mean so much. It does have a stunning view. Like the Royal Crescent, if you have a room in the Royal Crescent, and all it is this literally a crescent-shaped building, and let me save about the Royal Crescent in a second, okay? But its positioning isn't so important outside of an aesthetic appeal, but its dimensions are. But anyway, the circus. This is one that's really this is the one that's very interesting. The circus is actually three buildings that appear to be like in a roundabout, like a driving roundabout. It's these three huge buildings, apartment buildings, I guess, now. And they are surrounding this mound and like these 3 or 4 gigantic trees. If you follow me on social media, like on Instagram, I actually have some pictures of this as well. These gigantic trees and this huge empty space that almost looks like a bit of a mound. And they're surrounding that. Now, what is the purpose of this? Why did John Wood the Elder want to, enshrine this bit of ground? And John Wood's belief was that this mound, okay, which I had the pleasure of getting to stand in, was an ancient Druid worship site, and an important one at that. Now, this speaks to the larger reason of why did Bath get built where Bath is today? Bath, the entire city. Why did the Roman baths get built there? And the argument kind of goes is that, well, the Romans, when they show up in England, okay, and they start, changing things up there in the first century, that they, as the Romans do, and as a lot of quote-unquote conquering civilizations do, when they see certain cultural things that they could try and appropriate, or not appropriate, but apply to their own and create a rapport between the indigenous peoples of an area and their own, the conquering culture, they would do that. And Rome was very good about doing that. So you had, the theory goes is that, yes, this was a heavily pagan area that was worshiping various gods, particularly more of your libertine gods in the area of Bath. And so the Romans recognize this and they say, oh yes, you're worshiping you're worshiping Minerva. We know all about this. Minerva, yeah, I know you call it that, but it's actually Minerva. And so, so they built there because they considered it kind of a holy ground and a sacred ground. Because it was already an area where a lot of, I guess you could say, commerce, a lot of action was coming through, just because of its religious significance. for the ancient Britons. So that's why the city of Bath got built in the first place. So John Wood was, it's not ridiculous, the idea that where he was building the circus, these 3 buildings to surround this one little plot of land, that would have been a very important Druid worship site, because that's the whole reason the Romans built there in the first place. So, okay, got it. That's what you're doing. Now, that's not very Christian of John Wood, and certainly in the 18th century, England was a very Christian country. Granted, you had the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and all this other stuff going on, but it's an odd thing to want to celebrate. In fact, when I stood in it, you can't help but, I don't know. You think about it. Like, when you understand what little we can understand of Druid worship practices, you're kind of like, yeah, okay, so there's probably a ton of orgies here. And, there's a ton of group sex going on and all this shit, right? And so I was like, okay, I'll stand here. What the hell? And it doesn't help, kind of that whole ethos, kind of idea that's what it's all about. Not far away from the circus is an obelisk, also built in the same time frame, kind of in the mid 18th century. Of course, it's dedicated to, not one of the Woods, but a famous person at the time. But it's interesting that you have this triumvirate of, you have the circus, okay, which is surrounding this supposedly this Druid worship site. Then you have the obelisk, not but a few yards away, which, the obelisk, the importance of that in pagan ritual is obvious, representing the penis, power, all this different stuff, right? And then you have the Royal Crescent, which I'll talk about that more in a second. But you do have this triumvirate of buildings there that were all built at the same time and kind of fit a narrative, they fit a very pagan, esoteric narrative, which was interesting. So, and I could jest and say with half seriousness that when I was standing in the middle of the circle, that I kind of felt a little energized, perhaps, in the pants. In some ways I kind of did, but then I knew what I was stepping into. I knew the history and all that, and I would have found that sexy. So if anything was going on for me, it was just, it was in my head. There is no mysticism to be had there. So, but it's pretty wild. And the trees there, they have to be so old. It really, they did a good job. If it was really a Druid site, they play it off like it was. And I have more to comment on that, but first let's talk about the Royal Crescent. The Royal Crescent is just a couple streets away from this obelisk and also from the circus. And the Royal Crescent is just that. It looks like a crescent moon building. Now, when you're looking at it from the front, and there's a beautiful park in front of it that everybody can hang out at, there's a tremendous view of the hillside. If you happen to be in one of the apartments for the Royal Crescent, some very famous people have stayed in the Royal Crescent. There have been TV shows that take place within the Royal Crescent. It's this building, it's literally a crescent-shaped building. Now, the front of it looks very uniform, and it looks very, very interesting. What a lot of people don't know is that if you actually look at the Royal Crescent from the other side, it's all misshapen. There's all different size buildings and everything behind it. Only the front wall of it is actually a uniform design. Now, there's important mathematics behind that uniform design. I'll talk about that in a second. But most people they have no idea that actually from behind, it looks like a hodgepodge. It's a beautiful building from the front, but from the back, it's a mess. On the inside, it's a gorgeous building. But again, from the back, these are some of the most expensive apartments in all of England. But Yeah, you don't realize it, but because it looks so damn good from the front. Now the thing is that John Wood, the elder, and then of course followed up by John Wood the younger, who ended up completing the plans, didn't really seem to care what the rest of it looked like. He just wanted that one shape there. And so what is the reasoning behind that? Now, some theories go, and in fact you can read either the books or I think there's some YouTube videos by a guy named Alan Butler. He did a lot of books with a Freemason named Christopher Knight. Christopher Knight is well known for probably the most popular Freemason book of the past 30 years, supposedly a Freemason expose book that he did with Robert Lomas, that being the Hiram Key. Very, very popular book. So, and these guys, Robert Lomas and Christopher Knight are actual Freemasons. Alan Butler, as far as I know, is not. Again, put whatever stock you want to in the whole Freemasonry thing. That's not what I'm discussing here. I'm not getting into that realm of conspiracy. But what's interesting, okay, is that if you look into Alan Butler's work, and he's the first one to kind of point this out, and he actually went to Bath. This is how I had heard of it. He actually went to Bath to do a lot of these measurements. There is in England, in Britain, there is a lot. Understand that Britain has tremendous history. And I don't just mean the past 1,000, 2,000 years. I mean the past 10,000 years. For a long, long time. Some of the first roads, if not the first roads of any kind in the world, are found in Britain. And, they're on the order of, some odd 10,000, depending on how you date them, some people say 13,000, 14,000 years old. These are very, very, very old structures. And there was an archaeologist who at one point was very well respected, top of his game. We're talking early 20th century. That being Alexander Thom, who he couldn't help but discover that throughout the United Kingdom, we're to England, Scotland, Wales, Brittany, the whole thing, that in a lot of the ancient sites, there appears to be this uniform system of measurement. And he called it the megalithic yard. He broke it down more and said there's also a megalithic inch, which is about 2 centimeters. But that all of these different ancient sites, and not just Stonehenge, even though, and even Stonehenge isn't just Stonehenge. It's actually a superhenge. There's tons of them. It's an entire system. He broke a lot of this down, and he comes up with this concept of the megalithic yard. And you end up finding the megalithic yard throughout a lot of Europe, frankly, not just in England, but that is certainly a hotspot for it. And the megalithic yard is about, it's just shy of 3 feet. It's just shy of the yard that we have today. It ends up being like 2.72 feet or 0.83 meters. So, it's not even a meter long. But it is this uniform system of measurements. Alexander Thom's claim was that there's some odd 600 sites, megalithic sites particularly, that all seem to use this system of measurement. Now, claiming that, ancient peoples from thousands of years ago had a really, really clear-cut, definitive, not, it's not like cubits where you're just measuring from your elbow to palm, or elbow to the tips of your fingers, and obviously that could be longer for one person than it is the other. That it's this very precise system of measurement is not going to go over well with, your archaeological societies, especially, in the early 1900s. So Alexander Thom, he ended up kind of getting laughed out of archaeological circles, unfortunately, when he was one of the best of his day. And I personally, I think the evidence for the megalithic yard is remarkable. I could do a whole episode about the megalithic yard, okay? Because it's amazing how much it appears to keep showing up again. Thomas Jefferson was recommending new systems of measurement, which appeared to be the megalithic yard. There's a lot of this different stuff. So you can get into a whole conspiracy around the megalithic yard. And again, it is something that its name comes from the fact that it appeared to have been used on hundreds of megalithic sites. However, there's another site where it was used, or it appears to be used, and it was tested. Alan Butler did it himself, and other independent parties have as well. And that is, it appears that the megalithic yard was used as the basis for the curvature and the overall dimensions of the front wall of the Royal Crescent And so, you end up with, so here's my point, is that if you end up with, you have this this obelisk, I mean, it's a huge one. Okay, I mean, it looks like the Washington Monument. It's not that tall, but it's pretty fucking tall. All right. There's also on social media, there's pictures of me standing in front of it, and I'm 6'1". I mean, this thing's huge. So you get that built in the, in the 18th century. You get the circle built, protecting, encircling, enshrining this ancient Druid, worship site. And then you have the Royal Crescent, which has this interesting view, but then also this, really odd system of measurement that doesn't really make sense to use because it, in many ways, triples the cost of the building, of putting it all together and building it, of construction, I guess. So, you've got like three pieces of a puzzle here that are very interesting that all point at kind of, because Druids are often attached with Stonehenge and all this stuff. I mean, it's like somebody wanted to rebuild some Druid monuments and some, kind of Druid structures and who knows what exactly was going on there. And yeah, you can get into the fact that all these guys were Freemasons and probably Freemasons were behind the building of it and all that. The only thing I'll say to that is that this is a great book to own if you don't have a copy. I keep a copy. So Thomas Paine, of course, one of the founding fathers of America. Thomas Paine, he wrote the book The Age of Reason. A really good read. It's not 100% like, obviously I don't agree with everything in it, but it's a tremendous read. Now there's like this deist society, deist is in deism, that came out with, because they like to claim Thomas Paine was a deist. They like to talk about how really all the founding fathers weren't Christians. They were actually deists, which deists just believe that there's some kind of God, but he's kind of like a blind watchmaker. But they released a copy of The Age of Reason. It's called The Complete Age of Reason. And in it, there's a third part to The Age of Reason, which originally only has two parts. One of them being written while Thomas Paine was in jail, of course, and the other afterwards. It's part 1 and part 2. But then they have a part 3, and they have like a bunch of extant letters at the end of it from, various discourses that Thomas Paine had with various individuals. And in one of them, this is an interesting, point that blew my mind when I was reading it. And obviously it stands out when you're just flipping through the book. He talks about the Freemasons. And Thomas Paine just comes right out and says, Freemasonic history, the original Freemasons were the Druids. Now, that stands in contrast, perhaps, to a lot of what, say, Christopher Knight or Robert Lomas or some other Freemasons would care to tell you. They would say something else, like they would claim more of an attachment to, of course, Hiram Abiff, and all this. But Thomas Paine uniquely claims that Freemasonic history is, it leads you to the Druids. So, was John Wood the elder and John Wood the younger, were they putting this all back together? Were they rebuilding perhaps what they considered their history? As Freemasons or something else? And that's what was actually going on there? Well, maybe. That's all I'm going to say is maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of speculating there. You might even think I'm stacking the deck. But it's what I got. I really, I think it's a little too, especially, and I didn't even know about the obelisk before. And those aren't uncommon. A lot of people will make very large ones, they'll make giant ones of those as like a funeral, they'll put them in graveyards. In graveyards, there's lots of little ones, but like big ones like that will definitely be, set up as memorials for a person or an event or whatever. And certainly Bath has had plenty of events. It's one of the cities that was bombed during World War II. In fact, one of the 3 buildings in the circle was almost completely destroyed during the bombing of Bath, during World War II by the Nazis. And they rebuilt it, and it looks, and I can tell you, there is no sign that a bomb was ever dropped on that thing. Those buildings look uniform, look exactly alike. They really made sure of it. As far as I know, there was no updating of design, in any way. It specifically says, no, we rebuilt this, directly to specifications. So it was important enough to people. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of weird. It's very, very interesting. Myself, I just had the fun of, if that was actually a Druid worship site, of knowing that, God damn it, there's probably some awesome orgies that were had here. And I was all for it, I was like, yeah, this is fantastic. Now, I will say, so we stayed at a hotel in Bath, which itself actually had a beautiful, I also shared pictures of this on social media, had a beautiful kind of bathhouse in the bottom of it, not an ancient one really, but a replica, and that was very, very enjoyable. It was a very nice hotel, and total kindness of everybody involved that we were able to do it. But anyway. So at this hotel, Stephanie might not like that I'm saying this, but sex was awesome that night. I mean, not that we have bad sex, but hot diggity damn, was it a good time. I mean, wow. And look, like I said, it's all in my head because I know the history of this area. It's not like there's actually like any sexually charged eroticism, erotic energies going around in the town of Bath or whatever, or in the city of Bath. But just kind of a funny, haha. It was interesting that happened to happen, and maybe I just felt inspired. So there you go. Yeah. So no woo woo, no mysticism, no real esotericism, folks. I'm kind of being funny. I mean, I'm serious, but I'm more being funny in what I'm attributing it to. So yeah. So went to Bath, and that was awesome. I thought that's I would definitely, if I was going to visit England, I would definitely go there again because of, just I mean, it's really, that's ancient British history. It's ancient Roman history, which is kind of unique. There's lots of spots you can go where you can get British history, but not where you can kind of get both, or where you get a couple of cultures kind of in there. And so that was really something. I would totally go to Bath, England again, if the opportunity was ever afforded. And yeah, I mean, I just, like I said, I enjoyed the hell out of it. So in fact, even it was amazing. There was a bookstore there, and at this bookstore, like that week, unfortunately, we were leaving that Wednesday, so I couldn't attend it. Otherwise, I might have tried to do it. Ben Kane was going to be visiting the bookstore in Bath, which is amazing because Ben Kane is, he writes very popular books today about, fictional books about the Roman Empire. And about centurions, in various battles and everything. I mean, he has a very popular series about all that. So I thought that was very, it's fascinating that he would show up there. I mean, and it makes sense because it is such a Roman-flavored city. But yeah, I thought that was cool. So anyway, other than that, going through British customs, and I guess maybe you're wondering about that. Like, did I end up getting searched? Did they want the password to my laptop or my phone or anything like that? None of that happened. In fact, the travel across the board, we went on Norwegian Airlines. This is boy, if you ever need to go to Europe, what a great fucking airline. I mean, they are top drawer in what they offer. They have great, they have Android systems in there and everything. I mean, unless you're worried about somebody hacking those, but, just a really, really nice flight. So the travel aspects of it, riding the train in England, all this different stuff, all of that was amazingly very nice. That doesn't mean that you're not going to run into some kind of issues, when you end up at a border for the US or even for Britain with RIPA or whatever. But for whatever reason, it was a very, very smooth experience on mine and Stephanie's end. Both ways, going there, coming back, it all ended up working out very well. So if you're wondering if there was any issues along those lines, there really weren't. It was just very humdrum, very run of the mill. And I'm glad for that, believe me. And it's not like I didn't take some precautions. I did, but They weren't necessary. I'm glad they weren't necessary. Maybe next time they will be. So, it's not like I'm going to be off my guard or anything. So that was, it was an interesting trip. Visiting Bath was really something, and to actually see these buildings and, kind of see what was always talked about. And I get it. Like when people want to connect the dots with these things and get a little conspiratorial, I can really understand where they're coming from, because I've been there and looking at it. Yeah. Like it's a little weird, how these were designed, why they were designed the way they were, when they were designed, who designed them. It's a fascinating thing. So, I'm sure you'd all love for me to like talk about Druid history, a bit, but I'm going to have to save that for another time. So anyway, just had a fantastic time, going to England. There's not a whole lot else really to say about it. That kind of covers it. Bath was definitely like the real highlight. For me, I always love diving into history whenever I visit another country. I mean, I love diving into history in the U.S. too. It's just there's not always so much of it, and a lot of it gets whitewashed. But thank you very much. And but yeah, there you go. So had a great time. Very enjoyable. Ended up being about a week. I still did a lot of work from there. Still released, was releasing Sovereign Tech from there and everything. So, it wasn't exactly a vacation. I'm still nowhere near that point where I feel like I could take a real, honest to goodness vacation where I absolutely pay no attention to anything. I don't feel like I'm at that stage yet, but that, it was nice. It was good to get out of the country, good to go visit England, good to go visit good friends. That was really the best part of it. So, anyway, there you go. That's my little bit of history with England, and maybe some. Definitely check out Bankers if you ever end up going there. Ride the i360. That was cool. The i360 was pretty cool. I don't know if I said it earlier. I do wish that the that the floor was transparent. It wasn't, but that would have been wild. Like to look down and just see, Brighton below you. That would have been really, really weird. Yeah. So. Yeah, cool stuff. Just a fun little trip. Anyway, hope you enjoyed a little extra content. And got a lot more coming out over the next couple weeks. Like I said, I've got a lot of shows that I've already appeared on and that I will be appearing on, talking about various things and all kinds of good shit coming up. Going to be on School Sucks again. Just all kinds of great stuff. So there you go. Woo! I will tell you, if you didn't listen to, I also released another episode this week, which is a review of Teen Titans. Teen Titans, the Judas Contract. I mentioned it at the end of that. I'll mention it here. I'm doing a poll, and this is just totally for fun. It's really not a popularity contest or anything, but I'm doing a poll on Patreon. You can just go to sovereigntech.com, go to the Patreon page, and you'll find the poll for it. And it's for the top Sovereign Tech lady. Okay, and and you can vote on who is your favorite. Is it Pixel? Is it Jane Smith? Is it Stephanie herself? Is it Dr. Goldblossom? All the fictional characters are listed there. Valeria is there, of course. Elizabeth, Hadley. Which one's your favorite? I think it would be interesting. I might do something with that information. When I last looked, it was Pixel was in the lead most of the time. But then Dr. Goldblossom ended up taking the lead for a little while, and then Pixel. Now they're neck and neck. Last time I checked, it's a tie between Dr. Goldblossom and Pixel. So anyway, you can cast your vote on that just for fun. Again, totally just for fun. But I like it. It was an idea from a Sovereign Tech patron that a guy I really care about, and I thought he had a fantastic idea there. So anyway, that's it for this episode. Hope you just enjoyed the little fun chat. And kind of the oddity that I found in Bath, England, and there we go. So. Q&A coming out, Sex and Science Hour coming out, new Sovereign Tech coming out, other great content coming out. Stay tuned for all of it. Thank you so much for being a patron. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.